Access Fort Wayne offers reflections of our community. Production facilities provided by Access Fort Wayne are a service of the Allen County Public Library. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting organizations. For more information about creating your own television program with Access Fort Wayne, call 421-1250.
And welcome to our show, The American Veteran. I'm Dale Parrish, your host. Carl Fowler is our co-host. And also joining us today is Howard Rice, a Army veteran. Our guest today is Arthur Sovocool. He's been in the Marines, he's been in the Army, served in Vietnam and Korea. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. First thing I want to hit on is that tree incident that happened in Korea, I believe in '76.
Yes, in 76 we had 2 officers and 8 enlisted that were killed while they were trying to trim the tree in Panmunjom City, just on the south side of Liberty Bridge. And a bunch of North Koreans came across with axes and other kind of weapons, and they beat these people to death over trimming a tree. And for 3 days we were on full alert until we got everything set up the way that they wanted it set up. I was with the 2nd of the 9th Infantry up on the DMZ, and they took Alpha Company up into Panmunjom City to pull security, and they commenced to cutting the tree to the ground and doing away with the distraction. The only reason they wanted to trim the tree originally was so they could see the North Korean barracks on the north side and see what kind of activity they had going on at that time.
There was 2 officers you said was killed?
Yes, 2 officers. One was a major and one was a lieutenant.
And how about the enlisted men? Was they beaten or?
Yes, the 8 enlisted personnel that were there, which were 4 Koreans, 4 Americans, were also beaten and killed.
What was the result of this?
The result was that by the time, on the 3rd day, we ended up with aircraft overhead with bombs on board. We ended up with Marine Corps went out on the Kitty Hawk in the bay. We had the whole 2nd Division up on line to cut this tree down. And when they got through cutting it down, they cut it up into little pieces. And for every one of us that were originally there at that time, we were given a little block of wood, which has a little statement underneath it there.
Is that what this is here?
Yes, that's what that is.
Would you read, or can they read it?
They can read that.
Okay. Okay.
It has a little saying under it.
I understand even the Midway carrier was offshore.
Yeah, the Midway had the Marine Corps on
Yeah.
it. It had the one of the units of the 1st Marine Division, if I'm not mistaken, was involved into it, along with aircraft coming off of Okinawa and aircraft out of Japan were on there.
Yeah, yeah. You was on the DMZ all the time, and you was in Korea.
My year in Korea was on the DMZ. We were north of the Imjim River, and we were the only unit that was, or American unit that was north of the Imjim at that time, was 2nd Battalion, 9th Infantry, and I was awarded the Scout Platoon Leader Certificate because I was in the Scout Platoon, or I was a Scout Sergeant at that time. And then I was also awarded the Manchu Medallion, which this is. Matter of fact, both of them. For serving in Korea at that time on DMZ.
Oh, that's pretty nice.
And this is my certificate for the Manchu Medallion. And then I have two pictures here, one of me while I was in the Army and the other one while I was in the Marine Corps.
Oh.
Sure that's you?
That's me. I was a staff sergeant when I was in Berlin, Germany, when they still had the wall around us.
Is that right?
Yes, 1974.
Yeah.
Now this looks more familiar.
Yeah, that's me when I was a Marine in Vietnam, or just prior to going to Vietnam, when I came out of boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina.
Okay. Nice pictures.
Yes. Now, how you pronounce it? Imjin River?
The Im Jim River.
That's whereabouts?
That is, if you come out of Panmunjom, which is north of the Im Jim River, you're going to come south about a mile and you'll come across the fence that runs the DMZ that separates North and South Korea. And then you come about a half a mile south of that fence and you're at the Im Jim River. And most of the military in Korea is south of the Im Jim River. Only thing north of the Im Jim is like they put a battalion up there to pull guard duty along that chain link fence, and they've got bunkers every 50 feet or so, and people are actually, or military personnel are actually in there, and they're armed, and they're told you have an open field of fire at night, but during the daytime you don't. You still have to, call them and everything and call for their security and everything like that. But at night, it's more of an open field of fire like it was in Vietnam. At night, anything that moved was an open field of fire.
Okay. Okay.
One other thing I'd like to add to that, the Field Artillery's training range is also in the north of the Im, right up on a bluff overlooking that big bend in the Im. It's to the west of the Freedom Bridge, and is the Libby Bridge the one they call the low water bridge?
Liberty Bridge is the one that goes from Panmunjom City into North Korea.
The Libby, that's marked on your map as Libby.
Right.
Okay.
Freedom Bridge is the one that goes over
this
the
would
Im
be even, I imagine, even a little further west, because it was where the engine turns north to eventually go into North Korea.
Okay. Now, you was talking about the bunkers and everybody. Is it that way all the way across Korea?
all the way across the American sector. I don't know per se where the Korean sector takes on after the American. You have the ROK Marines that are on certain part of the DMZ, and you have the Korean ROK Soldier, which is on part of the DMZ. So, and then the only Army units you got on part of the DMZ is just the 2nd or the 9th, or whichever battalion they put up there at Camp Carroll at that time.
Okay.
You know, that I was there about 3 years later, in 79 and 80, for the 20th anniversary of the start of the Korean War. And they had, North Koreans shot up a lot of heavy machine gun fire across the DMZ, but I didn't hear of any casualties or anything that direct result. A lot of the radar antennas for the ground surveillance radars were damaged, but by that time we had everything just about triple sandbagged up there, that all the places. But again, I'm sure that I don't know if it'd been the 2nd or the 9th, but one of the 2nd Infantry Division units would have been likewise up to that, because it was to the point where in the sector where I was, the Koreans were putting the detonators in all the destruct charges for the bridges and over into the Chorwan, into the little bypass wooden bridge that went around the big hedgehog to stop a tank attack down the Chorwan Valley.
So they were preparing for an invasion.
That's right.
They was on big red alert then.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were the unit I was with, which was part of the 7th Division, was up at we were actually conducting annual service practice at the time that happened. Yeah. And we had to get a lot of heavy equipment that, since they wouldn't let us use the low water bridge, which was the only bridge capable of handling the weight of our rocket launchers, the truck-mounted rocket launchers. Yeah. We had to take them north up to just north of an area was called Little Chicago. I don't remember the name of the Korean name for the town. And they had to ford the engine at a normal fording place at low water. But the smaller vehicles couldn't make that, so we had to go to a nearby bridge and infiltrate across a few at a time, because that was all the Koreans were letting do those. So it was all, and the military units of their military had the right of way coming north to get into their defensive positions.
Sure.
Well, Art, when was you in Vietnam?
And from 68 to 70.
Okay. And what unit? You was with the Marines there.
And when I went to Vietnam, I was in the Marine Corps, and I was with Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 26 Marines, 5th Army, 5th Marine Division, attached to the 1st.
Yeah. See a lot of combat there?
We stayed in the field. We started out in Khe Sanh in late 68, and then we moved down into Ashaw Valley and Hanmar Province. We went from there over into what was known as Happy Valley, Elephant Valley, up onto Charlie Ridge, up the Ho Chi Minh Trail partway, back over into Da Nang for a 3-day shutdown, and then we were back out. We had Namo River Bridge, the Esso plant, the Hai Van Pass, Hill 124. We were all over Vietnam I Corps. Yeah. And where we went, there was another unit that was always following us through there, so we kind of kept it somewhat secure. Hill 124 wasn't a secure place because I ended up in firefights at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we ended up down in Ashaw Valley with a lot of firefights.
Yeah. They say that was like sticking your finger in water. As soon as you pull out, it's closed right back in with the.
Oh yeah, you could.
With the enemy.
Yeah, you couldn't keep the enemy out of there. You would take a hill, or you'd take like 881. They would take, and then as soon as that unit moved off there, whoever was going to go up there was bound and determined they were going to end up in the same kind of firefights that we did.
Yeah. Now, there were some ROC soldiers in Vietnam also. Did you run into any of them?
We had the Korean Marines assigned to us for about 3 months.
I understand that they were real fighters.
Oh yeah, Korean Marine and American Marines fought good together, and
yeah, good.
The Korean Marines
good.
The Korean soldiers. I had I was in Vietnam 2 years after my tour to in Korea. After 2 years after my Vietnam tour, I had a chance to talk with some of them, and I'd also talked with a couple of people who had been liaison officers to them. Okay. And they did a better job of cleaning out the embedded Viet Cong than any American unit could do.
They had more determination and more reason to, I would imagine.
Well, and part of it also being Oriental themselves.
Right.
They could look in. One of the stories that was related to me was that they went into this one village, and everything looked, to the American eye, everything looked like they were on starvation rations. But they got to this one hut, and all of a sudden they lined everybody up, and then there were straw mats on the floor, and they went around and started sticking bayonets into the floor, and uncovered a pit where these two people were hiding. And they asked, well, how did you know this? They looked at it and says, there's too much rice on this table for the 4 people that were there.
I see.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Now, when we were in Korea, we also had what was known as catusas that were assigned to us. And like in my scout platoon, I had 24 Americans and 16 Korean catusas that were part of our platoon. So we worked together with the South Koreans in Korea a lot too.
So that local knowledge is important, isn't it?
Oh yes.
Well, and the language translation, all of the ones that were catusas had to be bilingual.
Right.
Right, okay.
Well, we had some with us. I wouldn't say they was bilingual, not at all. That was in '53.
Yeah.
But in 76, I could actually walk up and talk with catusas and not have a bit of problem understanding them, and they had no problem understanding me.
Good. Well, by then, I suppose. Yeah.
Now, when we went to Vietnam, it was a different story when we had the ARVNs assigned to our units, because there you had to have an interpreter with you, because the ARVNs didn't have to know American.
Okay, explain what an ARVN is.
An ARVN is a Republic of Vietnam soldier.
Okay.
So, and yes, we did have them attached to us at times, even in the Marine Corps or the Army, depending on whereabouts you were and if you really needed them.
Yeah.
And they were equipped the same as you were?
Yes.
In other words, they had American equipment.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you run into any tunnels?
We ran into tunnels up on Charlie Ridge and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We actually ran into tunnels, and believe it or not, we were on Hai Vong Pass in Hill 1192. We were standing on the top of Hill 1192. 10 miles away, you could see Da Nang Airport. Halfway down Hill 1192 were tunnels that were embedded into that hill, and there was a bunker complex that I ended up in a firefight in there one day. And there's a lot of tunnels over there.
Yeah.
You never had to be a tunnel rat?
Yes, I did.
You did have.
Yes.
You were.
Will not go in tunnels anymore or something small space.
I can understand that. It's
Yeah.
not only the claustrophobia, but I mean, it wasn't armed good, and you never knew what you was going to run into, did you?
That's
Take
right.
a lot of guts to crawl in one of those.
Yeah, it took. I had other people who had more guts than I did to crawl into one of them. I mean,
We had a guest on one day that was a tunnel rat.
yep.
Yeah.
But they also had to have backups, and I was more of a backup tunnel rat. In other words, the first guy would go in, and then you'd have somebody to back him up because you didn't know what you're going to come up against. And the day that we came into up on the Hai Vong, or up on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, we came into the hospital type complex that was tunneled into the side of the hill. Yeah, we ran into quite a few NVA in there, and we were in NVA country.
Yeah.
That's why. And they actually had a hospital complex built into the side of that hill.
Yep. Yeah, we heard of that.
Well, they were good diggers.
I wouldn't want to dig all of them tunnels.
No. You don't know how long it took them to do that, but evidently they had their mindset on they was going to do it, and they did it.
They had to be digging them back when the French actually were in Vietnam.
I can believe
I
that.
would say so too. I'd concur with that.
Yeah. Some of those underground tunnels were deep and
Very
Right.
complex.
very complex, big rooms.
Oh yeah. Well, the hospital one that we ran into there, you had several tunnels that came into the hospital portion of it.
From other areas.
Right. And then when you got into the hospital, it was almost as big as this building altogether.
Gee.
So you had to clear all of that.
Yeah, you had to clear. You had no choice. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's just something that you have to do, but you don't want to do.
Did you destroy the tunnels when you leave?
You destroyed them as good as you could. I mean, you could blow them up, and you'd have to blow away half the mountain to get it to go away.
Yeah.
All
Just hope enough dirt caves in.
Right.
Okay.
The rest of it was just jungle area. Is that right?
No, if you went south of or the further south you got, the more rice paddies and the more banana groves and stuff that you ran into. From Da Nang north was basically your jungle with your triple canopy, where you couldn't see anything. I mean, it was dark 90% of the time. The light couldn't even get through the treetops. That's how bad it was. And we had to have planes come in and actually bomb out places so that we could build an LZ into them, so that we could get helicopters in there to lift the wounded and the dead out of there, or bring in supplies and stuff. And we used to bring engineers in there, and they'd have to blow up a whole bunch of trees so that you could make the LZ. It was just, the jungle was the jungle. But the further south you went, the more you went from banana groves to rice paddies, and eventually you ended up in, I guess, in south, down in the Mekong Delta, was more rice paddies than it was anything else.
Did they use Agent Orange when you was there?
Yes. They used Agent Orange in there, and they also used Agent Orange in Korea,
Yeah.
which I didn't know they had Agent Orange at that time.
Yeah. From their point of view, stripping the trees was important, but for the soldier on the ground getting sprayed by that wasn't too good.
No, and it stripped too many trees, because when I went to Korea in '76, you didn't have trees. You had bushes that stood about, waist high or a little bit higher. And I never seen any abundance of trees in Korea.
Everything was gone when he was there.
Well, a lot of it was cut down by the Koreans after the shooting war for fuel and so
I was
forth.
going to say the timber.
Yeah.
The timber there. When I was there in the 69, 70, the only place you saw any real heavy brush was areas that were still fenced off with and had mines that had been in the ground since the shooting war.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was an awful lot of areas, and every once in a while, some rabbit or small creature would go running into one and trip off one, and of course the animal was dead, but then they'd come around and repair the fences around it to make sure that nobody wandered in. They didn't even try to clear those areas. The only way to legitimately do it would have been to just have come in and dropped bombs right into the area, try to just blow the whole area up enough to.
Yeah, well, if they'd had these tanks with the chains on them or something, they just detonate them all.
This was
You'd
slopes. This was slopes that no
Oh.
tank could negotiate.
Oh, it's up on the side of the hills.
Yeah.
I know I was awful leery about getting off the beaten path. You never knew.
Well, it was still that way even down on Jeju-do Island, which is just south of Korea. They still had landmines on Jeju-do when I was down there in '76. Because after we got through with the incident up there on the DMZ, they took my scout platoon and sent us down onto Jeju-do Island for a week and a half, somewhat of an R&R. and we got to go down there and do rappelling and things like that we couldn't do while we were up there up on the DMZ because you don't have the capabilities of doing training like that, but we could down there on Chagito. But there was still places on Chagito that you could not, go because they had landmines and stuff that were still there and nobody's gone out and really looked for.
Yeah.
Well, with the way these areas around Camp Casey and along MSR3 that they were so overgrown with brush that there was, as I said, the only way to clear them would have been to literally bomb, explode, put enough overpressure on to set them all off of some sort.
Real quick, do you have a question, Carl?
No, I'm just going to say, if it's overgrown with brush, you wouldn't have had much way of detecting them at all.
No.
And they'd have been there, and anybody walking through that area, taking their chances.
Well, a lot of them may have deteriorated to the point of where they were
set off kind of easy.
Would set off easy, or some of them may have deteriorated to the point of being essentially inert.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What made you got discharged from the Marines? Then you went back in to try the Army out?
No, when I got discharged from the Marine Corps, I got out, and I was out for 6 months, and I didn't think that the civilian life was for me anymore, so I went to go back in the Corps, and in 1971, the Corps was breaking down. In other words, they were trying to make it a smaller...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it wasn't quite as receptive.
Right, and they said, well, what we're going to have to do with you, if you want to go back in the Corps now, is you're going to have to go a year active duty, or active reserve, and then we'll put you into the Corps, but you'll lose a stripe. And I said, no, I don't want to wait a year to actually go back to active duty. And even though when I was in the Corps, and I got out in 71, you were only making, as a sergeant, $118 a month. I still wanted to go back in because I had I knew that I had people to cover my back.
Yeah.
And on the outside, you didn't have that. So I said, okay, I'll go back into the Army. Well, when I went into the Army, I reported to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, as a corporal. Lost a stripe for a day because I was a sergeant the very next day. Once the first sergeant found out I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, he said, you're a sergeant, don't worry, don't even bother putting the corporal stripes on. But I ended up on funeral escort in San Antonio for a year and a half. And it's just, you felt more secure in the military at that time than I did out in the civilian world. That's why I went to the Army.
Yeah. I didn't mention that you were one of our newest members of the Korean War and Service Veteran Association.
Right.
And we're glad to have you.
Very glad.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And Howard, we're going to be working on you too one of these days.
Well, you're too late. I'm already a member of Chapter 133.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we're out of time. I appreciate you being here, Art, and appreciate your service.
Well, thank you.
So, remember, freedom is not free. So if you run into a veteran or somebody in uniform, just walk up to them and say, thank you for your service. Thank you, and good night. Good job.